Okay, here's a wild thought for you. What if all the technology in our lives, our phones, our cars, the internet, wasn't just a bunch of lifeless tools? What if it's actually a living force with its own urges, its own desires? It sounds like sci fi, I know. But that's the mind bending idea from Kevin Kelly that we're going to unpack today. The idea that technology actually wants something.
So, to really get this, you got to know a little about the guy who came up with it, Kevin Kelly. And here's the twist: he wasn't always some tech visionary. Actually, for almost 10 years, he lived the complete opposite life. He was out there wandering through remote parts of Asia with basically just a backpack. He talks about experiencing life with, and I love this phrase, the buffer of technology removed. He was colder, hotter, wetter, but he was totally connected to the world around him. He started out really, really skeptical of technology.
And that's what makes his story so interesting. You fast forward from that guy, the minimalist in Asia, to Kevin Kelly today, and he's surrounded by what he calls a river of artifacts. I mean, his studio is packed with gadgets. He even runs a whole website dedicated to cool tools. So what gives? Is he a hypocrite? Not at all. For him, it's proof of just how powerful and inescapable this pull of technology really is. It's a force that grabs a hold of all of us, whether we're trying to embrace it or, trying to run from it. Right. So how do you get from a guy living in a studio full of gadgets to this massive idea of technology as a living thing? Well, Kelly's core argument is that for most of history, this force has been hiding in plain sight. It was so everywhere, so pervasive, that we couldn't even see it. We didn't see it as one big, connected thing because we literally didn't have a name for it. And I mean that literally. Think about the word technology itself. It's way more modern than you think. Sure, the ancient Greeks had techne, which meant like a skill or a craft, but the idea of technology as this one giant concept, that's new. And get this for a crazy fact, the word technology didn't even show up twice in a single US State of the Union address until 1952. 1952. That means for centuries, you had these world-shattering inventions, the printing press, the steam engine, completely reshaping our societies, and we weren't even thinking of them as part of the same single system. So this is where Kelly's big idea really clicks into place. He says, okay, this system needs a name, and he calls it the technium. The technium is the whole shebang, the global, interconnected web of every piece of technology all working together. And here's the big leap, the really wild part. He argues that the technium acts like a seventh kingdom of life. Yeah, right up there with plants, animals, fungi, you get the picture. And just like them, it has its own urges, its own unstoppable momentum.
Okay, hold on. I know exactly what you're probably thinking right now because it's the obvious question. A toaster? My iPhone? How can a bunch of inanimate objects have a life of their own? How can they want anything? It sounds completely out there. I get it. But stick with me because Kelly actually makes a really compelling case that it's not as crazy as it first sounds.
So let's dig into that. If technology does want something, what is it? And where can we actually see these so-called urges in action?
Well, Kelly gives a fantastic, real-world example to make this less abstract. It's this robot called the PR2. So when the PR2's battery starts to run low, you could say it gets hungry. And what does it do? All on its own, it starts roaming around the building, looking for a power outlet. It finds one, and then it literally plugs itself in to survive. Now, it's not thinking, oh, I feel a bit low, better find a snack. But, and this is Kelly's point, if you were to stand between that robot and the power outlet, he says you can feel its want. You can feel this powerful, autonomous drive for self-preservation in action. And look, Kelly gets the skepticism. He even asks the question himself, right out loud, how can a toaster want? He knows it sounds like we're giving human-like consciousness to a kitchen appliance. And that's exactly the misunderstanding he wants to clear up. Here's the crucial difference. It's not about consciousness. It's about an urge, a tendency. I mean, think about it. We say a bacterium wants food, or a plant on your window wants to reach the light. We don't actually think the plant is having a thought about sunlight, right? It's just this built-in, unconscious, instinctual drive. And that's exactly how Kelly sees the technium. It's not thinking, but as a whole system, it has this deep, collective urge to expand, to connect everything, to get more complex, and above all, to keep itself going. Okay, so if we accept this, that there's this massive technological force with its own momentum, that leads to a pretty huge question for all of us, doesn't it? How much control do we really have? Are we the ones steering this thing, or are we just along for the ride?
This is a great example of how the technium kind of locks itself into certain paths. You want to hear a crazy story? Let's talk about railroad tracks. The standard width of train tracks we use today, it can be traced all the way back to the width of Roman war chariots. Seriously, they were built to fit 2 horses side by side. That width got copied for wagons, then it got adopted by the first English railways, which were then exported to America. Okay, now fast forward 2,000 years to the space shuttle. The rocket boosters had to be moved by train. And because they had to fit on those trains, their size was limited by the width of tunnels, which was determined by the tracks, which was determined by Roman chariots. A choice made 2 millennia ago was still shaping rocket science. That's how a tiny decision can create this powerful, almost inevitable path.
But here's the thing. Kelly isn't saying we're just powerless puppets. Not at all. He makes this really beautiful comparison to our own lives. Think about it. We're all born with certain genes into a certain environment. We don't choose those things, right? There are constraints. But within that framework, the choices we make, the freedom we have, it's huge. It's everything. We decide what to do with the hand we're dealt. And he argues it's the exact same thing with technology. The path has momentum, but our choices along that path matter immensely. And so that leaves us with a really big, provocative question to chew on. If this technomium really is this giant living system, this 7th kingdom of life, then what does that make us? What's our relationship to it? Are we its masters, constantly trying to force it to do what we want? Are we more like its partners, sort of evolving together? Or maybe we're its parents. We created it after all. And maybe our job is to guide it, to nurture it, even though we know, like any child, it's ultimately going to have a life of its own. It's a really powerful way to start rethinking the incredible world that we've all built.